All right, thank you very much, Joseph Olsen, for that background. With us in the studios, and of course joining also from remote locations, we'd like to welcome guests. First, the former Director of Voter Education and Publicity of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Nick Dazank. Now, regular and good morning, Nigeria. Nick, morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians. Also
here with us in the studios, another regular, Ezenwa Wago, who is Chair Partners for Electoral Reforms and convener Say No campaign. Ezenwa, morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome from Sokoto. We also have from our Sokoto studio, Dr. Ibrahim Mohammed Kangiwa, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nigeria.
In the KB studio, we're being joined by Dr. Badamasi Saidu, HOD Political Science, Federal University, Benin Kebbi. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
So much viewers at home. I'm glad. So much viewers at home.
Okay, let's begin the conversation with our station, if you like, guests this morning. From Sokoto Network Center, we just introduced Dr. Ibrahim Kangiwa, who's a public affairs analyst. Dr. Kangiwa, give us a sense of what transpired in Sokoto, of course, after the February 25th and March 18th elections. We still knew that there were matters outstanding in Sokoto, and all those matters now appear to have been resolved. But was it just so smooth in resolving those issues, or there were still knotty matters that, well, of course, you just had to take care of while the election results were declared?
Actually, most of the matters that transpired during the presidential, the governorship elections that took place in Sokoto were largely dealt with by the supplementary election. In most cases, these are issues that bother on insecurity, bother on issues of ballot snatching, violence, and in some places, INEC's inability to deploy. Remember that in some places in Sokoto, of course, we are still having challenges to do with banditry and insecurity, especially in the Sokoto East Senatorial districts. And alhamdulillah, things have improved remarkably because there was, so to speak, a heavy deployment of security personnel who are able to cover the place and cover the ground and to allow electorates in these supplementary election areas to go to poll and to go to the polling units and cast their vote, as it were. And largely, the results that came out of this was a true reflection, so to speak, of the will of the people, and their votes are really counted in most of the elections. Of course, it's only natural that you cannot always have it 100%. Of course, but we have a very few, if you may agree with me, areas where certain ugly issues of ballot snatching and, of course, violence between aggrieved parties and party faithfuls in respective places. Especially in this particular instance, we have had areas in Dengue, Shuni, Tureta, Bodinga federal constituency rather, where this issue of violence, of course, reared its ugly head. And of course, in very little places in Tambua, like Kebbi, this in the southern central district of the state. But on a larger note, largely, these have come to pass as these elections have been proven to deliver what was expected. We would have to appreciate it at this point the arrangements made by the electoral umpire, the INEC, and also the security personnel agencies that were on ground to make sure that things go as planned. The only thing that bothers us mostly is to do with issues of people who have been found wanting, people who have gone ahead, despite all these arrangements, to cause hitches here and there. of course, it's only logical that these things should be taken to its logical conclusions. People who have been arrested in this matter should be dealt with to the fullest extent of the law, so that this could serve as a deterrent to others who may wish to do the same in other times and in other elections. This is what exactly we can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your opening comments there. Let's bring in Ezenwa. You just returned from Sokoto. Let's have your own observation of what went down.
Well, I think my observation is not in any material particular going to be different from what the guests in Sokoto has said. But more importantly, the learning for me and for the observers that we deployed, especially in Sokoto South, where I also personally observed, is that you have more people milling around voting centers than the actual voters. Take, for instance, in a place like Almajiri Integrated School in Tambuwal, for instance, where I saw what people would ordinarily refer to as mammoth crowd. And the results that came from there is 41 for APC, 38 for, 31 for, 41 for PDP, 38 for. And then so when you match it with the mammoth crowd, you then understand that many people who perhaps even play within the environment are themselves not in truth voters. So there is a challenge with and if somebody who is not invested in elections sees that, he will say there is massive you hear such things like massive turnouts, but when you then engage the process, you see that it's actually not. Then I was also excited practically about the conduct of security agents, and there is a soldier that I particularly have been, I have been excited about the kind of comments he made. I asked him, I said, why are you people masked? Many of you are masked, and I think that that's not healthy to intimidate. He said, look, I don't want anybody to know me, and I don't want to know anybody. He said, so the first time the elections here were compromised, we were sent here, he said the army has fully taken care of me, and I'm here to ensure that. And they were doing that practically to ensure that we saw the EFCC. But Sokoto has, for me, escaped media attention for a very long time in the way when you are reporting elections. The kinds of vote buying that takes place, the issue around violence is also played down, maybe because it's far flung from media attention. And I think that was why perhaps the ICSES, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, decided to focus a lot of attention in that place. And that is why the outcome that we saw in terms of relative peaceful conduct of the election. Because, yes, we are citing Shuni and all that. But like I keep saying, there are about 2,000 voters that participated in that election in 490 thereabout polling units. And I think that if we have pocket of issues in one or two places, for me, it's not something that we can say it didn't go well. But it's to say that supplementary elections are corrective processes. They are actually things that help to correct what didn't go well. But it points again to the attitude of the politicians. And I have said this, over and over on different platforms. We over-respect the politicians. In 90% of the conversations that we will have, we talk about INEC. But the people who unleash violence, who send thugs to disrupt election, to cut ballot boxes, are in a comfortable zone in our conversation. They are made to feel very comfortable because we hardly call them out and say, look, if the politicians do not begin to think very seriously about this democracy and just see party politics and elections as a vote-catching process, then we will not deepen this process. We will not deepen democracy. We will not consolidate it. Because their attitude to power is that this democracy is just about power. and that it is about position. And so they throw everything into position, but the intrinsic values of democracy are not being discussed. And that, for me, is where I think a lot of attention needs to be going for Sokoto, really.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ezenwa Wango, for the insight that you have provided. Let's go back again to Birni Kebbi. That's the capital of Kebbi State, where we earlier introduced Dr. Badamasi Seidu, who is of Political Science Department at Federal University in that town. Dr. Seidu, tell us what happened in Birni Kebbi at the supplementary elections. Any surprises, or it was just a matter of fulfilling all righteousness?
My listeners and viewers at home, what I would say in the first place is that we are very lucky this time around. The election was successfully conducted and concluded on that very day. And I would like to add more on what one of the presenters or speaker have said on the issue of attitude and behaviors of the political leaders or the stakeholders in the first place. I think once you are talking of a rerun election, you know, what causes it is the issue of inconclusion in the previous election. And if inconclusion happens, so what causes the inconclusion? You know, in the electoral process or in the election process, there are so many stakeholders, ranging from the political parties, the candidates, the voters, security personnel. The attitude and behaviors of our political, of the stakeholders, either one of them or combination of this, is what is causing the problem for election not to be concluded, so that another rerun will be fixed. And like what my colleague have said there, that a rerun election is always a corrective process on the mistake that already happened in the first election now. But to my surprise, even on the day of the election of that very Saturday, looking at it from the security perspective, which security personnel should have been earlier in their polling unit to ensure that they have created atmosphere upon which election will be conducted freely, but they were still parading themselves in their station, waiting for order from A, B, C, for them to start moving to their various stations. I think these are some of the problems that we are having now. Stakeholders in the electoral process are not doing the right thing, and that is the major challenge of INEC. You know, security personnel are very, very paramount and are very, very important as far as election process is concerned. They have to be there on time, not to be waiting in their station, carrying out their morning parade, which is not necessary at that moment. They should have been earlier, done either by midnight, before that morning, or maybe even since yesterday, so that they can be able to be deployed on time together with the electoral material. But they have waited until that morning of the election, conducting their own regular, which is a routine parade in their own station. I think the INEC Commission should be able to do something to have a good collaboration with the security personnel, being a major stakeholder, because election cannot be succeeded without the support of the security personnel. Security personnel are the ones to be there on time. So this is one of the challenges, I think, because INEC is not a security agency. INEC does not have arms and ammunition. INEC is also not an law enforcement agency. So how do you expect INEC to be perfect in the conduct of this election? INEC have to rely on the security personnel, which are being controlled by other agencies, not by the INEC itself. So I think the problem that causes the rerun to happen, which is the poor attitude and behavior of some of the stakeholders, is still repeating itself at all the time when election is to be conducted in Nigeria. So INEC should have a very good collaboration, should do to do a more robust work to ensure that these problems are not coming up at the time of election. But we thank God, as I said, that the election was successfully concluded on that very day without any problem.
Dr. Badamasi Seidu is the HOD Political Science, Federal University, Birni Kebbi, for your opening comment. Let's bring in Nick Dazang, former Director of Water Education and Publicity, INEC. Was your expectations met in these supplementary elections? Let's get your views.
No, they were not. And let me say that I understand or appreciate that supplementary elections, rerun elections, by-elections are as challenging, if not even more challenging than the main elections themselves. And they come with their own baggages. And during these elections, that is supplementary elections, rerun and by-elections, in our own instance, you see more desperation on the part of the politicians. You see more of vote buying, as we've seen in the conduct of these supplementary elections. A number of ballot box snatchings, and the high noon, or the high watermark, you know, was the scandal that took place in Adamawa State, the unprofessional behavior of the resident electoral commissioner, who tried to truncate a process that was ongoing, who tried to usurp a responsibility that was not his, against the grain of the law, against the grain of Section 120, subsection 4 of the Electoral Act. And, you know, people remember these supplementary elections not for the good things that happened, not for the beavers that worked seamlessly, not for the IRF that worked, but, you know, for what happened in Yola. People are going to remember this will be like the imprimatur, the seal, you know, not of approval, but of disapproval, which is very depressing, because for those of us who have worked in INEC, our expectation is that our elections will continue to improve, and that anywhere we are and they mention INEC will stand 7-8 feet tall. So that's the kind of place we are coming from. And so to have this kind of depressing occurrence in Yola is really disappointing. And much as we always say the full weight of the law should be brought to bear on the small fries that perpetrate violence and other malfeasances, similar, you know, wrath of the law should be visited on also the high-profile offenders like this resident electoral commissioner. Apart from his being debriefed by the commission to explain what happened, and what happened, you know, went viral. It's not something you can hide. We expect that in the aftermath of his debriefing, either he will resign his appointment, or, you know, the commission will recommend that he is removed, and that the full weight of the law is brought to bear, which is that he should, on conviction and on being liable, be sentenced to imprisonment to the tune of 36 months. That's what the law says.
Okay, Nick Dazan, thanks. There has first to be arraignment before liability is proved, and then conviction, and then sentencing. Thanks a lot for the points that you've raised. We'll come to other related matters with this respect, especially the conduct of supplementary elections and some of the chest-beating incidents that we've heard reported. Oh, Beavers worked, oh, IRF worked, oh, the XYZ. When at the material time these things were needed to work, they didn't quite work well. What happened? That's a key issue. But I want to return to our guest in Sokoto, and that's Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad Kangiwa. Dr. Kangiwa, give our viewers a sense of what is happening in Sokoto. As Ezenwa indicated, there seems to be some media remoteness in assessing, evaluating, and therefore putting in the right frame political occurrences in Sokoto. Now, it would appear that virtually the same names keep popping up in the elections. In Sokoto, you have, of course, the incumbent governor who has won a senatorial seat. He spent 3 terms or more in the House of Representatives where he was Speaker. Now he has done 2 terms as governor. He's going back to the National Assembly. This time he will be in the Senate. You have a former governor of the state who is also returning to the Senate. Is Sokoto short of other qualified personnel to represent them?
Very much. I think it's a mixed bag of issues there, so to speak. We cannot say that Sokoto is bereft of formidable or candidates that are capable of winning elections or representing the state in various positions. But it tells you that the people of Sokoto appreciate these people, because election is about getting to the people, putting yourself to them, and then telling them what you have to offer. And if the people appreciate this, and if people believe that you have something to show for the time they've given you, then of course they are at liberty to re-elect you and continue to elect you. Because election in many places, it's not about tenure like the Senate. Of course, it's not like the governorship where you have 2 terms of 4 years each, after which you can no longer go and vie for that position again. But for that of the National Assembly or the State Assembly, as it were, of course, one can continue to put himself forward for election, and if his people appreciate and accept him and be able to give him the votes, of course, he will continue to represent them. But I tell you, people of Sokoto are appreciative of these gladiators in the 2 places. Starting from Senator Aliu Magatakadawamoku, the state leader of APC. Of course, this is someone who was at various times a deputy governor, a governor for 8 years, and then succeeded in coming to the National Assembly as a senator and going for the time as a senator, as the case may be. Likewise, Amin Waziri, who had represented Tambuwal, and Kebbi, a federal constituency at the National Assembly, and up to the point that he became the speaker 2011 and 15. So what we are saying is now he has put himself forward after having been elected governor for 8 years. Of course, the last time he won, it was by 342 votes. Whatever that means, of course, he has served 8 years as governor of Sokoto State, and his people in the Sokoto South Senatorial District decided to give him their votes. Of course, he slogged out with an incumbent senator, Ibrahim Dambaba, of course, but as it were, the result has proven that Amin Waziri has taken the day. So what we are saying is, of course, you can say that despite all this, there is also what we call, of course, the expectation of political parties to serve as what? Leadership training grounds for upcoming leaders. Of course, you can look at it that the current governor-elect was a former deputy governor of Amin Waziri Tambuwal, who was a former commissioner. So he has also honed his skills within the political process to be able to come forward and get elected. What that means is, of course, we have many people. The current incumbent, governor-elect, the deputy governor-elect, is also a former commissioner, a former member. So what we are saying is, it is about what people believe they have or what they want. In this case, all of these gladiators who have, or political candidates who have come and contested and won, and those who have lost, of course, are all tested hands. But of course, it showed you that out of the 11 House of Representatives we have in Sokoto, 8 have now gone the way of the APC, and 3 have gone the way of the PDP. Prior to that, in the 2019 election also, at the first instance, APC had the overwhelming majority of almost 11. But of course, after a series of rerun or supplementary elections, of course, PDP got some number also, which reduces the number of the representative, the federal constituency representatives from Sokoto, to the extent that it got to, after some tussles in the political space, APC also further loses some of the seats they had by way of changing political parties by these elected representatives. But as it were, this is to tell you that in Sokoto, like in most places in the north, people appreciate those who have been able to serve, those who have served very well, and they continue. Remember when Amin Waziri came in, it was still Aliu Magatakada that was the leader of the party when he came. But of course, because there were a sort of a coalition of forces, as it were, in the formation of the APC, which in the long run wrested power from the PDP. Of course, it was the same leader. So that means Ali Magatika Dawamako, as at today, is still the undisputed champion, as it were, because he has brought Aminu after himself. Aminu won elections. He has brought Ahmed Aliu now. Ahmed Aliu won election. And he has gone back to the Red Chamber, of course, again. It is a confirmation that the people of Sokoto State appreciate his leadership. Likewise, Governor Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, who had been a legislator, who has been a governor for 2 times, who has now succeeded in becoming a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. This is...
Dr. Ibrahim Kangiwa, thank you very much for your explanation, but your explanation appears to actually be restating the question that I posed earlier, why there appears to be the circulation of virtually the same set of political gladiators from the State House of Assembly to the National Assembly to Deputy Governor to Governor, and I asked whether there couldn't be, as it were, a recruitment from outside of the group. I believe that that will be an ongoing conversation. And I should have asked this off air, but I wouldn't know whether you are related to the late Shehu Kangiwa, who was Second Republic Governor of Old Sokoto State. Of course, unfortunately, he had a fatal accident from a polo game.
I think Kangiwa is a town.
It's a town, that's right.
Yes,
All right, so it's a town, I know that, we'll come back to that. But let's return to our studios.
Yes. Let me come to Ezenwa. The question Kingsley asked is very, very fundamental in this conversation. Recycled politicians, holding on to power, not letting go. Even if others aspire, they are brought down. What's your take on that? Let's get it.
The first is the access to public resources and what it is used for. So by 1999, the people who got into the space started working to constrict that space rather than expanding it. And it's not just in politics, it's everywhere. If you go to the army, for instance, generals are replacing themselves with their children. And there are examples that you can cite. If you go to public service, the people are recycling. They just have, when they are leaving, they bring back their wards to the place. So the politicians have found a way to, first and foremost, pauperize the people to the point where tokenism becomes something that is excitable. Because in many places, if we match the resources that has been available, just take constituency projects alone that has been appropriated, disbursed from 1999 to date, and say you want to match it with what is on ground, you will just find the disparity. That disparity comes from the resources that is then used to, in Sokoto, for instance, the Atampanization of politics. By that I mean Atampa is the wrappers that are shared, foreign currencies that are used to bribe voters, CFAs, not even Naira, food items and the rest of them, and patronage and cronyism, which is not just a northern thing, is a Nigerian thing, where people are just okay to be sent to pilgrimages as against industrialization, as against infrastructure, where people are interested in the people who share money rather than those who structure that in a way that impacts their livelihood on a more sustainable basis. So when you move across, you saw that the elites have perfected that process in the way that tokenism is now the way to hold down the people from, making demands in a way that. So if you have the resources, look at how much you are selling the forms in the first instance. How much do you sell the political parties? How much does it cost to go to the House of Representatives? How much does it cost to go to State House of Assembly? How much does it cost to be a governor in Nigeria? When you take adverts, staff, vehicles, everything that you put into it, you will only find that it is somebody. What has happened is that when you finish in National Assembly, if you have not been a governor, you come back as governor. If you have been governor, you go back to National Assembly, or you start thinking of being president. So it is a matter of a conscious decision by the elites to hold down the spaces that they have already acquired. But it will take much more than TV conversation seminal work to be able to open up what that would mean in terms of, and if we go into that, we can even be accused of inciting the people against.
Thanks again always for the insights. But I think that perhaps you should enter a caveat with respect to military. When you say former generals are, as it were, recruiting their own children and wards to also become generals. Look, many would argue, for instance, that getting into the military is not the same thing as getting into politics. It means that you are ready to lay down your life for the country. Obasanjo has a son who is in the military.
Almost lost his life in
General Guzo has a son who is in the military.
Can I clarify this? You see, let's understand what that means for our military and what it has signposted in the recent time. Discipline and command has virtually collapsed.
Again, that's doubtful.
On account, I will tell you, we just had a situation in which our military were running from bandits in just Cameroon. You had that. They where you are. And the reason for that, and that is why I told you off camera today, that we are not willing to have hard conversations, because the recruitment process for certain kinds of institutions in the country should be such that it should not be open to affirmation and patronage.
If you don't mind, let me say that even in the so-called advanced countries, there are families, that have generations that are recruited into the army. I can give you two: Schwarzkopf, the Schwarzkopf family, and the McCain family. John McCain's father was a general in the Navy. The Schwarzkopf that led the Operation Desert Shield and whatever. His father too was a general.
Do you need a letter from a member of the National Assembly to join the army in America?
No, what I'm saying is that there are certain constituencies, there are certain families that are known. They are even in Nigeria, there are certain places that are known for martial prowess. They are known for being interested in the army, as against others who are not interested, but for unemployment now.
Yeah,
so
let's
go and look at
let's come back to the conversation.
But coming back to the conversation.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Coming back to the conversation.
Just before.
Yeah.
All right. But no. Again, the matter is, I thought we could deal with it as an orbital.
Yes.
Because it made a number of very useful points. But
yes,
the example he cited of the military, look, going to the military is not a tea party. We see. Is it because sometimes we don't make a public show of our body bags at all times? Those body bags contain human beings.
Yes.
And nobody says, look, I want to go and commit suicide by being the first. But, of course, you know that once you are deployed, things can happen. Yes. And unfortunately, a number of our men and women have paid the supreme price. That's the point I was just making, that it wasn't as if, look, we are recruiting you to go and join a tea party so that all will be well within the family. A single shot could bring all of that to a close. I just, in terms of, I don't, Nick, you are itching,
yes, I'm itching to go, because I want to take off from the tangent he left regarding our politics. And I think for us to situate the challenge, we have to go back to the military during Babangida's time, when we had a protracted transition program, when credible candidates were banned and unbanned and banned again, and then the government rooted for its own preferred candidates. And even though some of us, were in the trenches fighting for democracy, at the end of the day, the kinds of persons that took advantage of the space were not even the activists. They were not the credible politicians. And as a consequence of this lacuna, you know, a situation where you have a space that was not filled up with persons whose concerns are delivering good governance. That is why you have this set of politicians who thrive on pauperizing the people and taking advantage of that pauperization to perpetuate themselves in power. So unless we address that, and also we address the followership, this tendency to glamorize those who steal, you know, we need to educate our people to understand that stores should be set by people who deliver good governance, who put in place infrastructure like roads, like hospitals, like schools, rather than people who come at the end of each electoral cycle and give them tokens and then they vote for them. So for me, the problem has to go back to that. I think that those of us who canvass for democracy, who fought for it, were a bit naive, because after taking the fight to the doorsteps of democracy, we allowed others to now take over.
But Ezenwa made a point here, if I may comment, that the people have been so polarized that they do not even have a voice.
Yes, and this polarization, this pauperization is deliberate, you know, because the so-called political class we now have, you know, thrives on that. And unless, you know, you go back and educate people to understand that the way to go is not to wait on handouts, but to demand certain things, and then to demand for certain individuals who also set store by delivering good governance. If we don't do that, and you can see, I've said it before, that since 2002, the election management body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, has tried to reform itself. In fact, even before 2007, when most stakeholders felt that that election was very challenging, the commission had consciously tried to reform itself, to introduce a number of technologies, beginning with Dr. Gobadia, to Professor Iwu, to Jega, and then to this particular commission, you know, to make sure that these technologies improve the conduct of elections, they add value in terms of transparency, and they encourage people to come out and vote. But we have not seen a similar reform on the part of the political class. And therefore, you could see, even from the conduct of the recent general elections, in the first set of elections, the presidential election and the National Assembly elections, there were glitches. There were challenges with the IRF. Now, INEC took that postponement, that space, and then it got its acts together. And then you could see improvements on the process. But even as INEC was improving on the process, the political class was undermining systematically these improvements, to the extent that election officials were attacked at collation centers, INEC officials were abducted, and so on and so forth. And we saw this trend continuing in the supplementary elections. So we cannot pile pressure on INEC in isolation. We must pile pressure on the political elite. And that is a duty for us as, you know, people in civil society, people in the media, to bring the same kind of pressure that we brought on INEC to reform itself. And also to, you know, lay premium on service. You know, political office should be service-driven, not filthy lucre-driven, not looking for money that you didn't work for. So these are the things we need to lay premium on. Otherwise, like I've said somewhere, it will be a kind of pointless effort, a Sisyphean effort. You keep doing it, and then you come back to it. You keep, and then you are not making progress.
That's right. Rolling a rock up a hill,
and then of course, and then it comes
just before you roll it back just before you get to the top of the hill
from Sisyphus.
Yes. All right, Nick Dazan, thank you very much. I want to return to Bernie Kebi, where we still have Dr. Badamasi Seidu. Dr. Seidu, well, again, for the benefit of our viewers, place into context for us what happened with respect to the governorship election. where the APC candidate has now been declared winner of that election. Now, one of the dramas of the February 25th National Assembly and presidential elections was the fact that a number of sitting governors who had wanted to go to the National Assembly as senators were defeated. And Kebbi State was one such example, where the incumbent governor sought to go to the Senate and he lost. I know that the saying is there that all politics is local, so what has changed between then and now that APC now has the governorship election in its kitty?
Once election is to be conducted like this, especially when it comes to rerun, there's always desperation by the politicians to ensure that they have used whatever available resources they may have to influence the voters' attitude in their favor. Because rerun election is very critical, because no matter how level of performance you had in the first election, the rerun election can change the narratives. So this makes politicians from both sides to be very desperate and employ all sort of means or material means to ensure that they have win the election when it comes to rerun. Here in Kebbi is not an exception. Using money and foodstuff like rice, like atampa, like what yes our colleague have said there, that is the atemporization of the process. Such a huge amount of resources at the disposal of the politicians is always used, especially when it comes to issue of rerun election, because everybody is afraid of the narratives to change against him. This makes the situation to become very tense and make the Electoral Commission to have little they have little to do in this regard, because the list of voters was already out in the first election. So politicians and their party and their agent and their supporters are already in the know of the polling units and the areas where they may likely vote for them or they may not likely vote for them. So what remains for them now is what? Is to use resources, to use money, to use all these material things to induce the voters to ensure that they have succeeded. So it also happened here in Kebbi, to the extent that based on the report, I was not there, that some certain amount of money was even earmarked for the electoral officials on the day of the election to ensure that everything is done in the favor of party A or party B. INEC must find a way, or in our next coming election, INEC must find a way of improving the system to ensure that people will vote direct from home without necessarily coming out to queue in, by deploying more technologies, more resources to allow people to vote right from home. Because if people are not coming out to queue up and vote during the election, I think the politicians and their party agents will not be able to have access to the electorate for them to even use any material means to induce their voting behavior. So I think this is the challenge and also the advice I will give to the INEC to ensure that more technology is being employed to avoid the using of. Concerning the question that you asked, what make the narrative to change now, given the fact that the outgoing governor has lost in his senatorial and now the new coming governor from the same party was able to. I think it all lies on the issue of that monetization and the use of resources to woo the voters. A lot of resources have been used, rice and clothing and wrapper were being distributed from both parties, not really the winning party alone. Even the opposition party have also employed that. Because of the limited number of the polling units that the rerun is going to be conducted, because of the available resources, just like what the colleague have said over there, the available resources in the hand of the politicians. So they have used it to ensure that they have won the election. And then we thank God, like I said, that the election was successfully concluded on that very day without much problem.
With you, Dr. Bodomasi, Kingsley asked a fundamental question here, and the governor on seat lost its election. Would you say there's a shift in thinking of the electorate in Kebbi State now? Are they more aware of the power of their vote?
thinking and attitude of KB people to vote for the ruling party when it comes to this last rerun election. Like I said to you, the use of money and other material things is the major issue in place. It's the major issue in place to ensure that the ruling party, given the experience they have in the first election, the first and the second election, they know that the only way out for them, even though the margin is still wide, but they have to employ other means using resources to ensure that they have win. It's not that people of KB have really changed. APC has been the ruling party in the state since 2015 to date. But because of their abysmal performance, they have not done well. So the party has lost ground in the eyes of the public. So what remains for the party now, especially the incoming governor, is for them to use all the available resources like I mentioned, using of right. Though it does not happen only to the ruling party, it also happens from the opposition party. They also use resources, but in the end, the election came out in the favor of the ruling party.
Just wondering, Jumai, I mean, Dr. Saidu keeps making reference to the use of resources, perhaps in an illegal way. For that, we have no proof that that is the case, that resources or state resources were deployed to buy over voters. It may have happened that the EFCC did deploy personnel across the various locations where the supplementary elections were taking place. Some DSS staff were even assaulted, and we also saw that in the past some EFCC officials were equally assaulted. The EFCC chairman says that they are compiling the proofs of evidence in order to ensure that persons who committed electoral offenses are prosecuted. INEC has also made a compilation of the list. I mean, I was just saying so that we temporize on the issue of using money. The incumbent outgoing governor was in power and still in power when he lost his election. Assuming we're talking about state.
I think for
yes.
KB, it's also important to signpost the background of the candidates.
Yes.
The candidates for the ruling party who eventually won was the deputy president of the Nigerian Labour Congress and also president of the Nigerian Union of Teachers. So you can't, there's a social capital that comes.
That's harvested.
That is harvested from that background. So it may not just necessarily be, money. Because again, money is important, but there is also, because you are asking about the shift. The shift in what happened at the senatorial and presidential, in many places, not just in Kebbi, there are places where the individual had to shine out above the party and then won those elections because of the social capital that individual is able to, yes, on his own merit. So we must be able to situate that. So is yes, the criminal use of money, I want to call it so because it is a crime, like you said. And part of my challenge with vote buying is that a lot of people don't see it as a crime. There is a sense in which we think it is okay, to do that. But the law is very clear, even to the point of food. Sharing food and drinks in the polling unit area is called treating. And it is an electoral offense, and you can go to jail or you can be fined for that. So many of our people don't know that. But again, we have seen in situations, there is a state in which the governor then will be going out and people will line on the streets and he will throw money from his vehicle. So it became a culture that the people will just, they know his route where he passes, and so those kind of things are things that we can deal with.
Who is or was this Robin Hood? I don't want to go into details. As a while, we'll pause you in the meantime. And you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the net.
You're welcome back, and we still have our guests seated here in the studio. We're discussing a review of the supplementary elections. We still have Nick Dazang, former Director of Voter Education and Publicity, seated here in the studio. Ezenwa Nwago, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms and Convener, Say No Campaign, and Dr. Ibrahim Mohammed Kangiwa, the Public Affairs Analyst, and Dr. Badomasi Saidu, HOD, Political Science, Federal University, Borno, Kebbi. Let me come to you, Nick Dazang. We know we had issues with the presidential and state assembly elections where logistics, they had problems with logistics, late start to the voting process. Some of it still reared its head during this supplementary election. Where do you think INEC need to work to make sure that there's there's no plan that is perfect actually, but how can INEC get it right?
Well, I think one of the sore issues, one of the challenges that, has dogged INEC over time is, and which is perennial, is that of logistics. And it pains some of us that in spite of conscious effort to improve on it, we keep relapsing. The Commission had to consciously enter an MOU with the Nigeria Union of Road Transport Workers and the Nigeria Association of Road Transport Owners. And then it now had to continue working on that MOU, appealing to their sense of patriotism, appealing to their sense of duty, even co-opting the Federal Road Safety Commission to ensure that the NURTW and the NATO, provided vehicles that were fit, that were not decrepit, because in some instances, there are members who supply vehicles that will take off from Garki and then break down on the way to Wuse. And most of ANEX work is calibrated in terms of time. The ANEX staff sleep in the registration area centers or wards, and there are 8,809 of them. And then there are about 1,099 super racks. These super racks are a cluster of these registration area centers. And in these racks, the ANEC officials are embedded with the security agents. And so if the people providing logistics don't turn up in time, it means that the ANEC officials, the security agents that are going to secure the polling units will turn up late. And there are polling units that are far-flung. There are polling units that are located in challenging terrains. And so if you don't leave in time, certainly, you cannot open the polls in time. And then...
I was just wondering, I'm sorry to jump in, but this is a related question.
Yes.
Because I'm beginning to find it curious and therefore probably not the full narrative.
Yes.
Of what plays out. When we talk about INEC logistics, the question your mind goes to Mahmoud, who is INEC chairman. Yes. Your question goes to Zambezi Crescent, which is in Maitama headquarters of INEC. You had the benefit of being an admin secretary for INEC. Have we sat down as part of the examination of the logistic challenges that we have in the states and also in other locations to see, look, what is the competence, for instance, of the RECs? What is the competence of the admin secretaries? If something goes wrong, is it necessarily the business of Mahmoud, who is the INEC chairman, or the national commissioner at the headquarters? What is the competence of these individuals? If they say hire 100 vehicles for logistics, how many of those vehicles did you actually hire? Is it the business of national headquarters to ascertain the roadworthiness of those vehicles? Have we sufficiently looked down the chain to see whether, as I said, there is competence? And if there is no competence, whether, of course, there can be sanctions and who imposes those sanctions?
Yes, I think that at the point of the MOU was entered into by the Commission and the leadership of the two transport unions. And it would seem to me that the unions prefer that they are dealt with at the level of leadership. And then they send down their instructions to their members. They percolate, they cascade their orders. But in most cases, you have issues with their members in the states responding, to these orders. In fact, in most cases, they will tell you that they were being shortchanged. So I think going forward, ANEC needs to revisit this MOU. It should try and see how it can decentralize these operations. And in addition, try and co-opt other, logistics companies outside the Nigeria Union Road Transport Workers and NATO. There are so many car owners out there, who are into transportation and logistics. But part of the fear has been that some of these owners also have proximity to politicians. And in trying to run away from them, INEC is held to ransom by the Nigeria Union of Road Transport Workers and NATO. So going forward, INEC has to begin to bring in other transport owners who may not be under the umbrella or canopy of this union.
I'm sorry, the key point I was driving at has to do with the organization of the logistics. Ezenwa, I know you are itching to come in here. Look, would it be the business?
Let me take it from you.
No, let him conclude.
No,
Okay.
I want to take it from you. Yes. And the reason I want to take it is that my organic Dazan has not weaned off his INEC protectionist territorialism, and so I see him play that. But as somebody who is enmeshed in this process directly, from a point of view of the bigger challenge is not with NATO. I used to make this argument that you are making, but I have found out that there is a lot of sabotage internally in terms of logistics, and it has something to do with benefits. And I'm not inventing this. In FCT, just close to us here, we went to visit the INEC office pre-election, as we normally do, to see the state of preparedness. And incidentally, somebody in our board, in our watching the vote district, was a former rec. So when we got to the place, the conversation started with the EO. And the EO, one thing led to the other. The EO eventually, how many vehicles do you have? Was approved for you. He said 100 and something. How many have you procured? Because the NATO guys and the people, they were having an argument when we came in. And eventually, it became that the NATO guys were shortchanged. They were told to provide less than what was approved and then do a shuttle, go and drop and come back, and it took the intervention of that former rec to call the rec of FCT and say, look, this is not right. Why don't you do this? And then that matter was resolved. So I just practically played into the point that you were raising about competence. And all of the challenge, there are very, very good recs. There are very competent recs. Make no argument about that. But by the time these 19 recs were introduced into INEC, after the vacancies occurred, Oga Kisley, you were here. We came here and protested that some of those recs had no experience. They had partisan backgrounds. We did a petition. So it was not just that we were saying that. We did a petition supported with evidence to the National Assembly. The chair of Electoral Committee, National Senate Committee, told us that our petition did not come with affidavits. That was why they could not look at it. They cleared all those people. Check all the states where you have problem, whether logistics or even the Adamawa that is playing now, comes into the part of the recs that we raised red flags on. And I keep saying it, that when that conversation was going on, the political parties outsourced that struggle to us and made it look like it's our own, both opposition and position. Now, all of those incompetence and all of those things we raise are manifesting in the drama that you are seeing. In the midst of election, INEC had to suspend 2 resident electoral commissioners.
One was in a hotel or somewhere.
Yes, you can't even say what you can't say it. You can't say it. What for reason for which he was suspended. Before that time, he has manifested all kinds of tendencies that showed that the man didn't even know what he was in INEC to do. Go to Imo that we are talking about. We are in court in Imo on account of the issues of that appointment, where we are being sued for defamation of character. So the issues that are playing currently are what you have situated in very clear terms. The quality of recruitment and how people are recruited into INEC must be a conversation that must follow after this election, because we have played lip service to that conversation. People are appointed, directors, he is a director, who have gone through the mills, qualified. You appoint somebody on the basis of chronism and patronage, and that person superintends over somebody who has gone through the mill. That intervention has become a bureaucracy. I keep repeating it. Professor Jega did that intervention where he brought in professors and all kinds of people and said, look, you know, the INEC structure itself is not going to deliver this process. Let us see whether we can try some other things. And from that point in time, we now relegated the people who have been trained, who understand these issues. They came and ambushed both political and administrative powers to themselves. And these other guys are just watching them. And in many times put a roadblock to their success. That conversation needs to happen. It's an inconvenient conversation, but it must take place. Because if it doesn't, like you said, we will continue to go around this. And the challenge in Nigeria is that every intervention ends up being a bureaucracy. Something that is supposed to just solve a problem at a particular time. We institutionalize it. And any attempt to get people, because we are always sidestepping issues. The challenge of, sanitizing an institution cannot be solved by going outside of that institution to bring something without looking at the root causes. Now we have beavers, and that's where I'm going to. Beavers. The idea of beavers is to show up integrity of elections. So if you have introduced beavers, there are things that should go. That intervention that was supposed to imbue integrity is supposed to leave, because you are conflicting now. You don't have faith in these your beavers, and you are still bringing somebody. So after Adamawa, there are issues that have been raised from that Adamawa that are deep rooted in the challenge that INEC faces, which has to come to the fore at some point.
Thanks a lot for the issues that you have raised. I asked the question because, as I said, it's worrisome that when we talk about logistics, if there are delays in the commencement of voting, whether in the general or supplementary elections in Edo State, everybody will be looking for the INEC chairman at Zambezi Crescent here in Abuja. If there's a problem in Rivers, you'll be looking for the INEC chairman. There's a problem in Niger, in Sokoto. So it's a bit worrisome. So what is the level of decentralization? And then if you decentralize in terms of management, what is the level of responsibility of the officers who are in situ? That's the reason why I raised it. And therefore, what is the liability if there are gaps, if there are lapses? So I think that those are... I want to bring in the other guests, Nick. I want to bring it. I raised this question. This is not to impugn the integrity of any person. We're just saying that if the process doesn't work quite well in your jurisdiction, who is to be held liable? Dr. Kangiwa in our Sokoto Network Center, still on this issue, but again from a different perspective now, because the matter came up about the apparent lack of focus on a state, for instance, like Sokoto. Let's just say there's very little media attention paid to Sokoto. How active are the CSOs, for instance, in Sokoto State? To say, throw up the issues, and then some of the points that we have discussed will become matters that people are fairly familiar with, and probably can also make interjections in terms of ramping up the political process in that state. How active are CSOs there, assuming they do exist?
Thank you, Kingsley. CSOs in Sokoto are, of course, also robust, like in many places. And what we will testify to that, because the CSO situation room that we have in Abuja and all the COSOs that are observing election elsewhere, of course, reports what they see on the ground. They escalate this thing to our national offices, to our respective state team leads and what have you. And all of these things are packed all together and centered and sent forward to Abuja. Likewise, some of these issues where you've had infractions are also placed at the doors of the INEC in Sokoto and all other officers that are expected to do that. But the question is what happened to all of these issues that have been raised, that have been found, infractions that have been seen? What has happened to them? This goes back to the issue of the audit. What do we do after every cycle of election? Of course, there are issues. You find the problems, you find issues, challenges here and there. Are we not supposed to learn from these issues? Have we learned from them? These are issues that we should be able to learn and correct some of these anomalies in the next round of elections. But we see things happening and recurring again and again, which means somebody is not doing his job, as Nwagu has said, then he should be called to question. People should answer for their failures. Not that we continue to give incentive to those who had failed continuously on a consistent basis. How do you expect to get different results? That is to say, for us in CSOs in Sokoto, of course, we're doing a lot. In fact, this could be attested to a lot of the observer missions that have come into Sokoto, the situation room. In fact, you see every other CSO platform that you have, largely in Nigeria, you have a reflection of them in Sokoto, like in any other place. And what happens in Sokoto gets escalated to the national so that it can be now escalated for everybody to see. All the handles and the media outlets, platforms there that are open to CSOs have also been activated. And all of this thing goes back. But what happened is, what have we done with all of these issues raised? Here we are, that in Sokoto, the form REC was suspended. What happened about that? How does that information got into people? But of course, it was from the observation by people who are key, like the CSOs in Sokoto State and other stakeholders that raised some of these issues. And they escalated these issues to the point where these issues cannot be swept under the carpet. But as we speak, these are supposed to be very transparent.
Okay, Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad Kangiwa, we really are running out of time and we're about to round up this program now. Let me bring in Nick Dazang. Nick Dazang, there are off-season elections coming up and issues with the supplementary elections already. There are also issues with primaries that have taken place in some states. How do you think INEC is going to juggle this in the off-season elections?
Well, these are elections that INEC has planned for. They have issued the timetable and schedule of activities for the off-cycle governorship elections in Kogi, Bayelsa and Imo already. And provision must have been made regarding that. But what to do is to go back and look at the elections that have been conducted. I had said earlier on that what happened in Yola, which serves as a kind of a climax, which is unfitting, is very depressing. And the Commission needs to quickly go back and look at how it conducted these elections and then improve on the conduct of these off-cycle elections, because Nigerians are hot. Nigerians are displeased by the conduct of these elections. That's the truth. And they must quickly do something to redeem their image. It is important. Now, regarding what my friend said, certainly there are recs who are paragons. There are national commissioners who are paragons. They have distinguished themselves. But there are also those that some of us are ashamed of. And the way to go for us to improve our elections is to go back to the recommendations of the Justice Uwais Committee. What you need to deploy to the states are not partisans, are not people who see INEC job as kind of harvest time, but put in place directors of election as recommended by Justice Uwais, persons whose careers will be at stake if they misbehave. If you do that, you will see a remarkable improvement in the conduct of elections. But so long as you put people who have partisan interests or whose allegiance is not to the Commission or who have no integrity, the job of INEC calls for integrity, for character, for self-sacrifice, and these are enshrined in the principles and the mandate of the Commission: honesty, integrity, impartiality, neutrality. So if you don't have these qualities, you should not be there at all. Maybe you should be somewhere else. I don't want to mention the place because
Indeed, Nick
it will be
Dazank, I believe
disparaging.
this conversation has opened a door for another conversation on the activities of the REC and how RECs are appointed. I'm sure it's going to be a conversation
No, it's not
in
only
the future.
regs, even the national commissioners.
Yes,
we should
and
discuss how they are appointed.
exactly.
Yes.
Nick Dazank, former Director of Voter Education and Publicity, INEC, thank you so much for your contribution to the conversation. Ezenwa Nwago, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms and Convener, Say No Campaign, thank you so much for coming back from Sokoto to honor our invitation to be in the studio today. I'm sure you will be resting after today, actually, maybe. We also have from our Sokoto studio, Dr. Ibrahim Mohammed Kangiwa, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much for your input to the conversation. And from our Birnin Kebbi studio, we're joined by Dr. Badamasi Saidu, HOD Political Science, Federal University, Birnin Kebbi. And that's how it's been on Good Morning Nigeria this morning. Thank you so much for watching. I am Jumma Yusuf. Tomorrow is another day and another interesting episode.
I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Look after yourselves and have a nice day.